Emily Carter stood outside the tall iron gates of the Monroe Police Academy, her hands buried deep inside her jacket pockets, trying to still their trembling. The morning air was sharp, cold enough to make her breath visible as she exhaled slowly. She could see her reflection faintly on the academy's glass doors. A young woman of 24, hair tied neatly back, eyes that looked more nervous than brave. The moment she stepped inside, the next 6 months would change her life forever, or break her completely. She hesitated only once, glancing at the small silver badge pinned inside her pocket, her father's old one. Sergeant John Carter, a decorated officer who had died in the line of duty when Emily was 16. She had promised herself then that she'd follow in his footsteps, not to wear his badge, but to honor what it stood for: courage, justice, and discipline. The words sounded noble when she thought them. But standing here now, surrounded by the intimidating reality of recruits, shouting and running laps in perfect formation, she felt small. Her first day began with introductions. Rows of new cadets standing straight as the drill instructor barked names. Emily tried to match the tone of the group when she called out her "Yes, sir." But the laughter that rippled through a few male recruits made her flinch. One of them, a tall guy with a confident smirk, leaned toward another and muttered just loud enough for her to hear. Didn't know they were recruiting babysitters now. The instructor's glare silenced them, but the words stayed in her head, echoing louder than the morning whistles. Inside the training hall, the cadets were split into groups for physical conditioning. The men grunted through push-ups, pull-ups, and sprints with competitive pride, while Emily struggled to keep pace. Her arms burned, her knees wobbled, and the sound of sneakers pounding around her made her feel like a ghost among warriors. Every stumble earned a snicker. Every drop of sweat reminded her that she didn't belong, at least not in their eyes. During the break, she sat alone on the bench, drinking water quietly. The same guy who mocked her earlier, Blake, as she learned later, walked past with his group, laughing. "You sure this is your place, sweetheart?" he asked, tossing his towel over his shoulder. "Maybe try dispatch. They got air conditioning and no running." The others chuckled. Emily stared down at her bottle, biting the inside of her cheek to stop from replying. She wanted to yell, to say she'd earned her spot here. But instead, she swallowed the anger and looked out at the shooting range beyond the field. That's where her father had taught her years ago. The old, dusty field behind their house where they practiced together every weekend. She remembered how his large hands guided hers, how he'd whisper, "It's not about force, Emmy. It's about control. The gun listens to calm hands." She had been good, really good, back then. But this place was different. Here, no one cared about her story or her father. They saw only weakness. When evening came and most cadets retreated to the dorms, Emily stayed behind. The range lights flickered on, casting long shadows across the dusty ground. The smell of gunpowder lingered from earlier practice sessions. She put on her earmuffs, loaded her pistol, and aimed at the target 50 feet away. Her first shot missed the bullseye by 3 inches. The second by 2. By the 5th, she was shaking. "Focus," she whispered, steadying her breath. She closed her eyes for a moment and pictured her father again, the calm, patient man who never raised his voice. When she opened them, something changed. She adjusted her stance, slowed her breathing, and squeezed the trigger with care. The bullet struck near the center. She tried again, closer still. A small smile crept across her lips. For the first time that day, she felt capable. The sound of slow clapping startled her. She turned to see Sergeant Miller, a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s, stepping out of the shadows. "Late practice, Carter?" he asked, voice deep and even. "Yes, sir. Just trying to improve." He nodded, studying the target board. "You've got decent form. Need more consistency, though. Most of your classmates were gone an hour ago. You plan on making this a habit? Emily hesitated, then nodded. If that's what it takes, sir. Miller didn't smile, but there was a flicker of approval in his eyes. Then keep at it. But remember, this job isn't about being better than them. It's about being ready when no one else is. When he walked away, Emily stood there for another hour, shooting until her hands ached. Each bullet she fired was a promise that one day they wouldn't laugh. One day they'd remember her not for her weakness, but for her precision. By the end of the week, she'd started waking up an hour before the others to run laps alone. At night, she practiced loading and unloading her weapon in the dark, memorizing every click, every weight shift. Slowly, her movements became smoother, faster, sharper. She didn't talk much to anyone. The academy was full of egos, loud voices that filled every space. But Emily's silence made some uneasy. Blake, especially, seemed to take it personally. During one drill, as they paired off for combat simulation, he leaned close and whispered, "You can't keep hiding behind quiet. Out here, silence gets you killed." Emily didn't respond, just tightened her gloves and faced him squarely. When the whistle blew, he came at her fast, overconfident. She sidestepped, blocked, and landed a clean hit on his chest. The shock on his face was priceless. He stumbled back, the other recruits laughing now, but not at her. Sergeant Miller raised an eyebrow. "Not bad, Carter. Looks like she can hit back after all." Blake forced a smirk, rubbing his ribs. "Beginner's luck," he muttered. But even he didn't sound convinced. That night, Emily sat by her bunk, muscles sore but heart steady. For the first time, she didn't feel like an outsider. She still had far to go, miles of drills, months of sweat, countless bruises, but something inside her had shifted. The doubt that had followed her since day one began to fade. Outside, the range lights blinked out one by one. The academy settled into silence. Emily lay down, staring at the ceiling. She thought of her father again, how he used to call her his quiet storm. She smiled faintly. Maybe that's what she was. A storm no one saw coming. And deep down, she knew the real test hadn't even begun. The laughter, the taunts, they were just the wind before the thunder. Her moment to prove herself was on its way. And when it came, she'd be ready, calm, focused, unstoppable. The sun rose over the Monroe Police Academy, its golden light cutting through the morning mist that hovered above the training fields. Emily Carter was already up before the bugle sounded, lacing her boots with mechanical precision. The bruises on her arms had faded slightly, but the soreness in her muscles was constant, a quiet reminder that she was earning every inch of ground. The academy never slowed down. Every day began with a brutal physical test that pushed recruits to exhaustion, sprints, push-ups, obstacle courses, and endurance runs that felt endless. Emily ran behind most of the pack, her boots thudding heavily against the damp dirt, breath coming in short bursts. The men ahead of her shouted encouragements to one another, turning the run into a competition. None of them bothered cheering for her. Blake, of course, led the race. His steps were strong and confident, his grin smug even as sweat dripped from his brow. When Emily finally crossed the finish line, he was waiting there with his usual smirk. "Not bad, rookie," he said, pretending to check his watch. "Only a minute and a half behind. At this rate, you'll be ready to chase down suspects in about 2 years." His friends laughed, slapping him on the back. Emily ignored them, focusing on her breathing. The sting of humiliation burned inside her, but she let it fuel her instead of break her. "I'll take speed over arrogance any day," she muttered quietly, though not loud enough for them to hear. After breakfast, the recruits gathered at the shooting range. Rows of gleaming pistols sat on the tables, along with boxes of ammunition. The air smelled of gunpowder and oil, sharp, familiar, comforting in a strange way. For Emily, this was where she felt closest to her father. It wasn't about violence. It was about discipline. Sergeant Miller stepped forward, his gravelly voice cutting through the chatter. "Today's exercise is accuracy under pressure," he said. "You'll have 30 seconds to hit as many targets as you can at varying distances. You miss more than half. You redo it until you don't." Groans rippled through the group. Blake rolled his shoulders dramatically. "Don't worry, I'll save some bullseyes for the rest of you," he said, earning a few laughs. Emily stayed quiet, loading her weapon with careful rhythm. Each bullet slid into place with a metallic click that echoed in her mind like a heartbeat. Blake went first. His shots rang out in a steady rhythm, confident, practiced. When the timer beeped, he lowered his weapon and turned toward the others with a grin. 24 out of 25, the range officer announced. The group erupted in whistles and applause. Blake winked at Emily as he walked past. "Try to hit the target, not the air, okay?" Her turn came next. The laughter around her felt heavier now, almost daring her to fail. She adjusted her stance, took a deep breath, and aimed. The timer buzzed. She fired 1, 2, 3 shots in quick succession. Her hands trembled slightly, her mind racing. The noise, the pressure, the eyes watching, it all crashed into her at once. By the time the last bullet left the chamber, her palms were slick with sweat. When the range officer walked over to check her results, Emily felt her stomach twist. 17 out of 25, he said flatly. Barely passing. Blake's snicker was loud enough for everyone to hear. 17? Maybe she was aiming at butterflies. Sergeant Miller's eyes darted to him. "Enough," he snapped. Then, turning to Emily, his tone softened. "Carter, your stance was good, but you're rushing. Accuracy isn't about speed, it's about control. You've got potential. Slow down and let the gun breathe." Emily nodded, swallowing her frustration. Potential. That word hurt more than the failure. It meant she wasn't there yet. That night, while the others relaxed in the rec room watching sports or scrolling through their phones, she returned to the range. The field lights flickered, casting long shadows across the dusty lanes. She set up the targets herself, loaded her weapon, and began again. One shot, miss, second shot, closer, third shot, bullseye. Her breathing steadied. The sound of the trigger clicking became hypnotic. She imagined her father's voice again. "You don't pull the trigger. Emily, you press it, gently, like you mean it." By the time she emptied her third magazine, the board was clustered with near-perfect shots. Sweat dripped from her forehead. Her arms ached, but her heart felt lighter. She didn't realize Sergeant Miller was watching again from the shadows until he spoke. Most cadets would have gone to bed hours ago. Emily straightened, wiping her hands. "I can't afford to be most cadets, sir." Miller stepped closer, eyeing her target. "You're improving fast. Keep that up, and you'll surprise a few people." She smiled faintly. "That's the plan, sir." The next day, the training got harder. The instructors had the recruits run drills under heat stress, jumping over barriers, crawling under wire, then firing at pop-up targets. Sweat stung Emily's eyes, dirt clung to her uniform, and her muscles screamed. Yet every time she aimed, she remembered that calm from last night. She hit more targets than before. Still not perfect, but better. Always better. Blake noticed. "Looks like you're finally hitting something," he said one afternoon, half teasing, half serious. Emily didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her results were starting to speak for her. Weeks passed. Slowly, the ridicule shifted. The laughter quieted when she approached. Some recruits even began asking her for advice, small things at first, like breathing techniques or grip control. She shared what she knew without pride or hesitation. But Blake wasn't ready to let go. His confidence faltered as Emily climbed in rank, and jealousy began to replace mockery. "You got lucky," he told her one day after another drill where she'd outscored him. "Don't think one good day changes anything." Emily met his eyes for the first time. Calm, steady, unflinching. "You're right," she said softly. "One good day doesn't change anything. But consistency does." That answer threw him off guard. He expected anger, not quiet strength. That night, while the other recruits slept, Emily stayed up again, reloading, practicing, pushing herself to the limit. Her hands blistered, but she didn't stop. She could feel something building, not pride, not revenge, just purpose. By now, even the instructors had noticed. Sergeant Miller mentioned her name during a morning briefing. "Carter's progress is impressive," he said. "She's focused, disciplined, and not afraid to fail. That's what makes a good cop." Blake rolled his eyes, but deep down, he felt the sting. The same girl he once mocked was now the one everyone was talking about. Emily, however, wasn't listening to the noise. She had one goal: to be ready for the upcoming squad evaluation, the biggest test of all. It was a live simulation, combining endurance, speed, and shooting accuracy. Most cadets dreaded it. Emily looked forward to it. On the night before the test, she stood alone at the window of her dorm, looking out at the training grounds lit faintly by the moon. The silence was comforting. The academy was asleep, but her mind wasn't. She ran through every drill in her head, the stances, the reload times, the breath between shots. She wasn't the fastest. She wasn't the strongest. But she knew one thing for sure. No one wanted it more than she did. As she turned off the lights and lay down, her heart beat in rhythm with the ticking clock on the wall. Each second brought her closer to the moment that would define her. Tomorrow, she'd either prove herself or be forgotten. And deep down, she already knew which one it would be. The next morning dawned cold and gray, the kind of morning that made every breath sting and every muscle ache. The Monroe Police Academy buzzed with tension. It wasn't just another training day. It was the day of the squad evaluation test, a make-or-break event that determined which cadets had what it took to move forward and which ones would wash out. Emily Carter stood in front of her locker, hands steady as she laced her boots. Around her, the dorm was filled with nervous chatter and forced jokes. Some recruits stretched their arms. Others bragged about their readiness, masking fear with arrogance. Blake, as always, was at the center of it all. "Today's the day, boys," he said, slapping one of his friends on the back. "Let's see if we can make it quick. Maybe we'll finish before the rookie even hits her first target." His friends laughed, the sound sharp and mean. Emily didn't look up. She'd learned that silence had more power than reaction. Her focus wasn't on them. It was on the small silver badge resting in her locker, her father's old one. She touched it briefly, a quiet promise to make him proud. When the recruits gathered outside the shooting range, Sergeant Miller stood before them with his usual no-nonsense stare. "Today's evaluation will test your endurance, awareness, and shooting accuracy," he said. "You'll move as a squad through a timed course with both static and moving targets. Remember, speed means nothing without control." His gaze drifted over the group, pausing on Emily for a split second. "You'll be graded individually and as a team. Understood?" "Yes, sir." The group roared. Miller gave a single nod. "Good, Blake, you're up first." Blake smirked and stepped forward. He adjusted his gloves, glanced at Emily, and winked. "Watch closely," he said. "You might learn something." Emily watched as the course timer buzzed. Blake took off running, vaulting over barriers, sliding into cover positions. His form was sharp, his confidence undeniable. He fired at every target in quick succession, bullets tearing through the air with practiced precision. The other recruits cheered as the final buzzer sounded. 23 out of 25, the range officer announced. Time, 48 seconds. Blake turned around, grinning. Still the best, he said under his breath. When it was Emily's turn, the atmosphere changed. The energy shifted into something heavier, curious. Some recruits whispered, some folded their arms, waiting for entertainment rather than competition. Emily stepped forward, checked her weapon, and listened to the faint hum of the wind. Her heart beat steadily, not fast, not anymore. She'd trained for this moment when no one was watching. Sergeant Miller's voice cut through the murmurs. "Carter, you ready?" She nodded. "Yes, sir." "Then show us what focus looks like." The timer beeped. Emily moved. Her steps were light, deliberate. She didn't sprint like Blake had. She flowed, every motion calculated. She reached the first barrier, dropped to one knee, and fired twice. Both targets down. Without hesitation, she advanced, her breath even, her hands steady. Each trigger pull was precise, each shot clean. At 20 seconds, she hit every close-range target. At 35, she took down the moving ones, perfect hits every time. When she reached the final set, she paused for half a heartbeat, exhaled, and fired. The buzzer rang. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the birds seemed to stop. Sergeant Miller walked to the target boards, his boots crunching on the gravel. The recruits shifted nervously, some whispering, some frowning. Emily stood motionless, weapon still lowered, waiting. When Miller turned around, there was a rare glint of something like pride in his eyes. 25 out of 25, he said. Time, 46 seconds. The words hung in the air like thunder. Blake blinked, then forced a laugh. "No way," he said, shaking his head. "That's gotta be a mistake." Miller didn't even look at him. "No mistake," he said firmly. Carter just set a new record. The crowd erupted, not in laughter this time, but in stunned murmurs. Emily holstered her weapon calmly. She didn't smile, didn't boast. She simply met Miller's eyes and nodded respectfully. "Thank you, sir." He nodded back. "You earned it." As she walked past Blake, he couldn't find any words. The same smirk he wore every day was gone, replaced by something he'd never shown her before: disbelief. Emily didn't stop. She didn't need to. Her performance spoke for itself. By the time the test ended, word had already spread across the academy. "Did you hear?" Carter outshot the entire squad. 25 out of 25. Not even Blake's done that. She beat his record. The whispers followed her everywhere, echoing through the halls like wildfire. Later that afternoon, when the results were officially posted on the board outside the mess hall, Emily's name was written at the top. Carter, Emily, score, 100%. Time, 0:46. She stood back and watched as the others crowded around it. Some looked impressed. Some tried to downplay it. Blake stared at the board for a long moment, then turned and walked away without a word. Sergeant Miller approached her quietly. "You kept your focus," he said. "Didn't let the noise get in your head. That's rare." Emily gave a small smile. "You said once this job isn't about being better than them. It's about being ready when no one else is." Miller's lips twitched upward. "Looks like you're listening." That evening, she went back to the range one last time. The lights flickered softly, and the air was still. She set up a single target, 50 feet away. No stopwatch, no score sheet, just her and the silence. She aimed, fired once, and hit the bullseye dead center. For the first time, she allowed herself to smile. She thought of her father again, the weekends they'd spent training, his laughter, his patient corrections. She whispered softly, "I did it, Dad." In that quiet, she didn't feel like the nervous girl who'd walked through those academy gates weeks ago. She felt like an officer in the making, not defined by others' opinions, but by her own resolve. The next morning, things were different. When she entered the dining hall, the conversations paused briefly. Some recruits nodded at her, some smiled. Even those who hadn't liked her before couldn't deny what she'd done. Respect was slowly replacing mockery. Blake sat at his usual table, staring into his coffee cup. When Emily walked past, he spoke without looking up. "You got lucky." Emily stopped. "Luck doesn't reload itself every night," she said quietly, then kept walking. He didn't reply. He didn't have to. Deep down, he knew she was right. From that day forward, everything changed. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't the rookie or the soft one. She was Emily Carter, the cadet who outshot the entire squad. And while others saw it as a victory, she knew it was only the beginning. There would be harder days ahead, tougher battles, and real lives on the line. But now, she had something unshakable, the belief that she could stand her ground, no matter who stood beside or against her. As she left the range that evening, the sky was painted in orange and gold. The world felt wide open, filled with possibilities. She didn't just want to be a good officer. She wanted to be the kind of one her father would have been proud to serve with. Calm, precise, fearless. And as the academy lights dimmed behind her, she knew one thing for certain. They'd remember her name long after this day was over. The news of Emily's unexpected victory spread through the academy like wildfire. By the next morning, every cadet had heard about the quiet girl who shattered the squad's record. The shooting range, once a place of laughter at her expense, had become her ground of triumph. But Emily didn't bask in it. Instead, she showed up early again. Same ponytail, same calm face, same fire burning behind her eyes. The whispers didn't distract her anymore. She had learned that silence, when backed by skill, was louder than any mockery. Sergeant Miller had noticed her transformation too. During drills, his usual stern tone softened slightly when addressing her. "Carter," he said one morning, "you've got something most cadets don't, discipline. But don't let your emotions cloud it. Humility keeps a soldier steady." Emily nodded, already knowing that lesson by heart. The rest of the recruits were divided. Some admired her. Others resented her. Blake, the academy's golden boy, felt that resentment most sharply. His title as the best shooter was gone, taken by someone he had mocked in front of everyone. Every time he saw her at the range, perfecting her aim, his pride stung. But beneath that bitterness was a reluctant respect he refused to admit. During lunch breaks, Emily often sat alone at the far table, quietly reviewing her notes. One day, as she was scribbling shooting techniques, a shadow fell across her notebook. "You got lucky last time," Blake said, sliding into the seat across from her. His tone was laced with arrogance, but his eyes betrayed curiosity. "Care for a rematch?" Emily didn't look up immediately. She finished her note, then met his gaze. "It's not about luck," she said softly. "It's about focus. But if you want a rematch, I'll be there." Blake smirked. "Tomorrow, after drills. We'll see who's really focused." That night, Emily returned to the firing range after hours. The echo of gunfire filled the empty hall as she practiced, every shot a whisper of determination. She wasn't training to defeat Blake. She was training to defeat doubt, the invisible enemy that had followed her since day one. Her arms trembled from exhaustion, but she kept shooting, adjusting her aim, timing her breathing. Miller passed by on his late patrol, pausing at the door. He didn't interrupt. He just watched with quiet pride. "Carter," he said finally, stepping forward. "You're the kind of cadet every squad needs. Not because you're the best, but because you never stop trying to be better." She smiled faintly, reloading her weapon. "Trying is the only thing I've ever known, sir." The next day, the academy gathered at the range. The tension in the air was thick. Even instructors lined up to watch the showdown between the top two shooters, Blake, the academy's pride, and Emily, the girl who had come from nowhere. Sergeant Miller stepped forward. "Standard tactical drill. Moving targets. 2 rounds. Accuracy and time will determine the winner." Blake cracked his neck, glancing at Emily with a confident grin. "Hope you brought your luck again." Emily said nothing. She simply adjusted her stance, checked her magazine, and took a deep breath. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1, fire. Blake's shots came fast and loud, his style flashy and aggressive. The targets dropped in rapid succession, impressive, but slightly off-center. Emily, on the other hand, moved with quiet precision. Each movement was deliberate, her breathing steady. She fired once, pause, then again. Her bullets landed almost perfectly in the center every time. When the last target fell, silence swept over the crowd. The instructor checked the scores. Blake, 89%. Carter, 98%. The recruits erupted in murmurs. Blake's smirk vanished. Emily lowered her weapon, calm as ever. She turned to him, offering a hand. "You did good," she said sincerely. "It's not a competition. It's progress." Blake hesitated, then shook her hand. "Guess I've got some learning to do," he admitted, his voice lower, more genuine. That moment marked a shift in the academy. For the first time, Emily wasn't the outcast or the girl trying to fit in. She was respected, not because of her gender, but because of her grit. Even those who once mocked her began asking for tips. She helped them patiently, never condescending, never arrogant. Her quiet nature made her a mystery to many. When others celebrated their victories loudly, Emily often went back to the dorm, opened her worn notebook, and wrote small notes about her day. Focus under pressure. Breathe. Never lose calm. They weren't just lessons in shooting. They were lessons in survival. Weeks passed, and Emily's bond with Sergeant Miller deepened. He became her mentor, teaching her not only the art of precision, but the psychology of leadership. "In the field," he said one afternoon, "your weapon is just a tool. The real power lies in how steady your mind is when chaos hits." Emily nodded. "I think I understand that now." Miller smiled. "You will. And soon, you'll face something that tests it for real." One rainy afternoon, during an endurance exercise, Emily pushed herself to the limit. The squad had to navigate through mud, crawl under barbed wire, and sprint across obstacles. The male cadets groaned, slipping and swearing. Emily's smaller frame made it harder, but she never complained. When she stumbled, she got back up. When her knee bled, she kept moving. Blake, running behind her, watched in disbelief. "Carter," he yelled, "you're insane." "Maybe," she gasped, smiling through the rain, "but I'm finishing this." When the drill ended, she was the first across the line. The others collapsed in exhaustion. She stood tall, mud-soaked and trembling, but victorious. Even the toughest instructors couldn't hide their admiration. That night, while everyone slept, Miller found her sitting alone under the academy lights, cleaning her weapon. "You remind me of someone I trained years ago," he said quietly. "He became one of the finest officers I've ever known." "You've got that same fire." Emily looked up. "Did he ever doubt himself?" Miller smiled. "Every single day. But he never let it stop him. For the first time, Emily felt a spark of true belonging. Not because she had outshot the squad or won any medals, but because someone believed in her, genuinely believed. It was a feeling stronger than pride. As the semester drew to a close, the Academy prepared for the final tactical simulation, a live scenario test designed to evaluate teamwork, leadership, and composure under fire. Emily was assigned as squad leader. The announcement shocked everyone, especially those who still thought leadership belonged to the loudest voice in the room. When Blake heard the news, he simply nodded. "Guess we'll be following your lead, Carter." She smiled faintly. "Only if you're ready to trust me." He grinned. "After what I've seen? I'd be a fool not to." As the sun set over the academy that evening, Emily stood by the range one last time before the test. The sky burned orange and gold, the air filled with distant echoes of gunfire from other teams practicing. She looked down at her calloused hands and exhaled deeply. Everything, every insult, every bruise, every night of self-doubt had led to this. Tomorrow, she wouldn't just prove herself again. She'd lead, and this time, the entire squad would see who Emily Carter truly was. The morning of the final tactical simulation dawned gray and cold, the kind of weather that made even the toughest cadets uneasy. Emily Carter woke before sunrise, nerves humming like electricity in her veins. The dorms were still quiet, but she could hear the distant rumble of boots in the courtyard and the metallic clang of weapons being checked. This wasn't just another test. It was the culmination of everything they had endured for 6 long months. As she tied her hair back and zipped her vest, she caught her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes looked sharper, more certain. Gone was the girl who used to flinch at laughter or hesitate before pulling the trigger. This was someone forged by doubt, fire, and focus. She touched the silver medal her father had once given her, the one she carried like a silent promise, then slipped it into her pocket. By 6 a.m., all cadets assembled on the training field. The air was thick with anticipation. Sergeant Miller stood before them, clipboard in hand, his expression unreadable. "Today," he began, voice booming, "you will operate as real officers. No instructors, no guidance, and no excuses. The mission: rescue hostages, neutralize armed suspects, and extract safely. You will be judged on teamwork, precision, and composure." He paused, scanning the lineup before his gaze landed on Emily. "Carter, you're leading Squad Bravo." A few cadets exchanged glances, some surprised, others skeptical. Blake gave her a nod, one that wasn't mocking this time, but respectful. "Yes, sir," Emily replied, her tone steady. "Good. Remember, leadership isn't about control. It's about trust. Lead them well." When the whistle blew, Squad Bravo moved into the mock urban setup, a maze of abandoned buildings, vehicles, and cardboard hostels. The scenario was designed to mirror chaos. As they entered, gunfire echoed through speakers, smoke grenades hissed, and the loud wail of simulated alarms filled the air. "Positions," Emily ordered. Her voice was sharp but calm, carrying authority that surprised even her teammates. Blake took point, while Rodriguez and Patel covered the rear. They moved like shadows, sweeping corners, checking doors. Emily's mind raced, mapping every sound and motion. The goal was simple: rescue the hostages hidden in Building C without setting off alarms. Inside, the hallways were dark and narrow. Blake signaled a possible movement near the second door. Emily gestured for silence, crouching low. "Two inside," she whispered. "Wait for my mark." She counted 3 breaths, then kicked the door open. 2 suspects, mannequins rigged with sensors, stood by the window. Emily fired twice, perfect center hits. The monitors beeped green, neutralized. "Clear," she called out. The team advanced quickly, confidence growing. Blake glanced at her with a grin. "You've got instincts, Carter?" She smirked. "Just focus, Blake." They reached Building C without triggering a single alarm. But when they entered, the simulation escalated. A loud explosion shook the floor, lights flickered, and a voice through the speakers announced, "Hostage injured." Time reduced to 5 minutes. Panic rippled through the team. "We'll never make it," Patel said, voice trembling. Emily turned sharply. "We will. Stay low, follow my lead." She moved first, navigating through smoke-filled corridors. Her vision blurred, lungs burning from the simulation gas, but her focus never wavered. Every second counted. The hostages were hidden behind a locked steel door at the far end of the building. Blake tried the handle, locked. "We'll need breaching charges." "No time," Emily said. She dropped to her knees, pulling out a multi-tool from her vest. Within seconds, she dismantled the lower hinge and jammed the lock. "On my count, 3, 2, 1, kick." Together, they burst through. Inside were 3 mannequins with heat sensors. The moment the sensors detected movement, an alarm blared. Emily froze, thinking fast. The rule was, if the alarm went off, mission failed. She spotted a laser tripwire cutting across the room, barely visible. "Everyone stop," she ordered. Using her flashlight's reflection, she traced the laser's origin. "Blake, hand me your mirror." He hesitated but obeyed. Emily tilted the mirror, redirecting the laser beam just enough to trick the sensor. The alarm silenced. Carefully, she led the team around the traps and tagged the hostages for extraction. 3 minutes left. Miller's voice echoed through the intercom. Emily's heart hammered, but her movements stayed fluid. "Rodriguez, cover the exit. Blake, secure perimeter. Patel, get those ropes ready." They began pulling the mannequins out when another explosion went off, blocking their original path with debris. The emergency lights blinked red. "Alternate route," Emily shouted. Her eyes darted around until she spotted a maintenance shaft. "This way." She crawled through first, clearing the space for the others. Dust and metal scraped her arms, but she kept going. Once out, they reached the extraction zone with 30 seconds left. The buzzer sounded. Silence. Then the voice over the loudspeaker. "Squad Bravo, mission complete. Highest accuracy, full extraction, no casualties." "Excellent work." Cheers erupted from the squad. Emily stood still, breathing hard, the adrenaline slowly fading. Blake clapped her shoulder. "I take back everything I ever said about you. That was damn impressive." She gave a small, tired smile. "Thanks. You were solid out there." Back at the field, Sergeant Miller met them with a proud grin. "Outstanding, Squad Bravo and Carter." He paused, his eyes gleaming with pride. "You didn't just complete the mission. You led like a professional. Calm, decisive, and sharp under pressure. That's what leadership looks like." Emily stood tall, mud and sweat streaking her face. "Thank you, sir." As the cadets dispersed, Miller called her aside. "You know, when you first arrived, I wasn't sure how you'd handle the pressure. You were quiet, too quiet. But I've learned something from watching you." "What's that, sir?" she asked softly. "That true strength doesn't shout. It listens, observes, and strikes when it counts." His words stayed with her long after the test ended. That night, as she sat by her bunk polishing her weapon, she thought of how far she'd come, from being knocked in the first week to leading the best squad in the academy. She no longer doubted herself. She no longer needed validation. A few days later, graduation day arrived. The auditorium was filled with proud families, flashing cameras, and rows of cadets standing tall in polished uniforms. Emily's heart raced as names were called. When hers echoed through the speakers, Cadet Emily Carter, Top Marksman and Leadership Excellence Award, the hall erupted in applause. She stepped onto the stage, accepting the medal from Sergeant Miller. He whispered, "You've earned every bit of this. Never forget why you started." Emily nodded, eyes glistening. "I won't, sir." Later that evening, as she stood outside under the setting sun, Blake approached her one last time. "So, what's next for you, Carter?" She smiled faintly. "The field. The real one. That's where the real tests begin." He extended his hand. "Well, if I ever find myself in trouble, I hope you're the one covering my back." Emily laughed, a sound rare for her, but genuine. "I'll be there, Blake. Just try not to get in too much trouble." As he walked away, Emily looked toward the horizon. The Academy's flag fluttered behind her, and in her chest she felt a calm, fierce pride. She had come as a quiet rookie, mocked and doubted. She was leaving as a leader, respected, battle-ready, and unbreakable. The journey wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. But for now, Emily Carter allowed herself a small smile, because she had proven to everyone, and to herself, that courage, when focused, could silence any voice of doubt. The real world was nothing like the Academy. That became clear to Emily Carter the moment she walked into her first precinct, the 27th District Station in Chicago. The fluorescent lights flickered above chipped desks. The air smelled of burnt coffee, and the sound of ringing phones never stopped. This wasn't a training ground with simulations and controlled outcomes. Out here, one wrong decision could cost lives. "Welcome to the chaos," said Captain Ross, a broad-shouldered man with gray hair and eyes that had seen everything. He handed Emily a stack of case files and gestured toward a cluttered desk. "This is yours. Don't get too attached. You'll rarely be sitting here." Emily smiled faintly. "Understood, sir." Her partner, Officer Daniel Reese, appeared a few moments later, tall, easygoing, with a calm smile and a badge that gleamed despite the wear on his uniform. "So you're the Academy's miracle shot," he said, extending a hand. "I've heard the stories. Outshot your entire squad, huh?" Emily chuckled, shaking his hand. "Stories always sound bigger than they are." "Fair enough," he said. "Just remember, out here, it's less about aim, more about instinct. You ready for your first call?" Her pulse quickened. Always. Their first few shifts were uneventful. Domestic disputes, traffic stops, false alarms. But even in the small things, Emily was meticulous. She watched everything, learned the rhythms of the city, the way sirens echoed differently in narrow streets, the way danger often hid behind silence. Reese quickly learned to trust her judgment. "Most rookies talk too much," he said one night as they patrolled under a pale moonlight. "You listen. That's rare." "I've learned more from silence than words," Emily replied, eyes scanning the road. A few weeks later, on a cold Thursday night, the calm shattered. The radio crackled with urgency. "All units respond. Armed robbery in progress. Multiple hostages at Northside Market." Reese glanced at her. "That's close. 2 minutes out." "You good?" Emily nodded, adrenaline already rising. "Let's go." As they sped through the city, sirens wailing, Emily's training replayed in her mind. Breathing, angles, cover, control. She could feel her heart racing, but her mind was razor sharp. When they arrived, chaos reigned. Police cars blocked the street, red and blue lights painting the dark brick walls. A crowd had gathered behind the barricades, whispering anxiously. Through the glass storefront, they could see movement, a masked gunman pacing, waving his weapon, shouting at terrified hostages. Captain Ross stood near a cruiser, barking orders into his radio. "Reese, Carter, you're on flanked detail. The suspect's unstable, maybe under the influence. Negotiations aren't working. Emily took a quick assessment. One gunman inside, possibly another covering the back. The hostages were huddled near the counter, women, an elderly man, and a teenager shaking uncontrollably. The tension inside was suffocating, even from a distance. "Let's circle behind," she whispered to Reese. They slipped into the alley, their footsteps quiet against the wet pavement. Every sound, every breath, felt amplified. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed inside. Someone screamed. Gunshot. An officer shouted from the front. Emily's body moved before her brain caught up. She reached the back door, tested the handle, locked. "Cover me," she murmured. Within seconds, she picked the latch open using her multi-tool, the same one she'd used in the Academy simulation. Inside, the dim hallway reeked of gasoline and panic. She could hear the suspect yelling, "Nobody moves, or I swear I'll shoot another one." Reese's voice came softly over comms. "He's agitated, might go off any second." Emily peered around the corner. She had a clear view. One man, mid-30s, shaking, eyes wild. Sweat poured down his forehead as he gripped a shotgun. He wasn't trained. His stance was unstable, panicked. She took a deep breath, steadying her sights. "I can take him," she whispered. "Carter, wait," Reese said. "Command wants a negotiation window." But Emily's instincts screamed otherwise. The suspect suddenly raised the gun toward a hostage, a young woman sobbing uncontrollably. There was no time to think. She inhaled, exhaled, and fired. The shot was clean, precise, and controlled. The man collapsed instantly, weapon clattering to the ground. The hostages screamed, ducking for cover. Officers rushed in, shouting, "Clear, clear." Reese moved to secure the weapon, checking the suspect. "Non-lethal," he said with relief. "You hit his shoulder." Perfect control shot. Emily lowered her gun slowly, her hands steady. She felt her heart pounding, but her breathing remained calm. She'd done exactly what she was trained to do, act when it mattered. Captain Ross entered moments later, surveying the scene. "Good work, Carter," he said, eyes serious. "That was a textbook intervention. You saved those people." But Emily didn't respond right away. Her gaze lingered on the frightened faces of the hostages, especially the teenage boy still trembling. She knelt beside him, speaking gently. "You're safe now. It's over." He looked up, tears streaming down his cheeks. You shot him before he could hurt us." She smiled softly. "That's what we're here for." Outside, reporters had already gathered, cameras flashing. "Officer Carter, is it true you neutralized the suspect?" One shouted. She ignored them, walking toward the ambulance to check on the hostages instead. Fame, praise, none of it mattered. What mattered was that everyone was alive. Later that night, after the scene cleared, Reese and Emily sat on the hood of their patrol car, silence settling between them. The city lights reflected in puddles, sirens fading in the distance. "Not bad for your first real crisis," Reese said with a grin. "You didn't even flinch." Emily chuckled softly. "I wanted to. But then I remembered something Sergeant Miller said. Calm mind, steady hand. Guess it stuck." He nodded. "You've got something rare, Carter. Most rookies freeze their first time out." "I couldn't," she said, staring into the distance. "People were counting on me." That night, she couldn't sleep. The sound of the gunshot replayed in her mind, not out of guilt, but awareness. She'd learned the reality of what her weapon could do, how a single decision could change lives forever. She took her father's medal from her nightstand, running her thumb over its cool surface. "I did it, Dad," she whispered. "But it's harder than I thought." The next morning, She arrived at the station to find her name on the bulletin board. Commendation for bravery in the line of duty. Her fellow officers applauded, but she just nodded humbly. Ross approached her later. "You handled yourself with precision," he said. Most officers would have hesitated. But remember, every trigger pull carries weight. It's not just skill, it's judgment. "I understand, sir," she said quietly. Weeks passed, and the story of the Northside Market spread beyond the precinct. News outlets called her the sharpshooter cop. Videos of her calm command under pressure went viral. But Emily stayed grounded. For her, heroism wasn't glory, it was responsibility. Blake even called one evening. "Heard about the hostage thing," he said. "You've gone from academy star to field legend." Emily laughed softly. "Legends are overrated. I just did my job." "Still," he said, "you're making the rest of us look bad." "Then catch up," she teased, and hung up smiling. But underneath that smile, she knew something deeper. The field wasn't done testing her. Every victory came with a shadow of what could have gone wrong. Every life saved came with the haunting thought of those she might not be able to save next time. Still, Emily Carter had found her purpose. And though the world outside was unpredictable, one truth remained. She was ready for whatever came next. Because when chaos erupted, Emily didn't break. She focused. And when she focused, she never missed. The weeks after the Northside Market incident changed everything for Officer Emily Carter. Her name had spread throughout the department, whispered in the break rooms, praised in roll calls, and printed across news headlines. "Rookie officer saves hostages in precision standoff." But while the public called her a hero, Emily didn't feel like one. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the suspect's terrified face before he fell. He had lived, yes, but that moment, frozen in her mind, reminded her how fragile control could be. Still, she kept working, showing up early and leaving late, refusing to let the praise go to her head. Captain Ross noticed. One morning, as she reviewed reports at her desk, he approached quietly. "Carter," he said, leaning against her desk, "I know you've had a busy few weeks. How are you holding up?" "I'm fine, sir," she replied automatically. Ross raised an eyebrow. "You're fine? You shot a man to save a room full of people. That's not something most officers shrug off easily." Emily hesitated, then exhaled slowly. "I keep thinking, what if I had missed by an inch? What if that shot had gone wrong?" Ross nodded. "That's the sign of a good cop. You care about the what-ifs. But don't let them paralyze you. The people you saved, they're your answer." His words lingered in her mind as she resumed her shift. Reese noticed her quiet mood and decided to lighten it. "You know," he said, sipping his coffee, "most officers would have framed that commendation letter and bragged about it for months. You're over here acting like you just got written up." Emily smiled faintly. "I didn't become a cop for praise." "I know," he said, "but it's okay to be proud sometimes." Before she could respond, the radio crackled again. "Unit 12, respond to 45th and Maple. Possible armed suspect barricaded in residential area. Shots fired." Reese glanced at her. "Looks like our shift just got interesting." They raced through the streets, sirens cutting through the city's hum. When they arrived, chaos had already erupted. Officers were crouched behind cruisers, neighbors screamed from behind barricades, and gunshots echoed from a two-story house at the corner. "Suspect's got a hostage inside," a SWAT officer briefed quickly. "Wife says he's ex-military, unstable. We've tried calling him out, no response." Ross arrived moments later, barking orders. "We're setting up a perimeter. No one fires unless absolutely necessary." Then, spotting Emily, he called out, "Carter, you're taking negotiation support. You've got a calm head, use it." Emily nodded, slipping her headset on. She listened carefully as the negotiator's voice echoed through the speaker. "Mark, we're not here to hurt you. Let's talk, man." From inside came a chilling reply. "No one comes near, or she dies." Emily could hear the woman crying. The man's voice trembled, angry, desperate. She turned to Reese. "He's scared, not just violent. There's something else going on." "Agreed," Reese said. "But he's got a rifle. This could go south any second." Emily's heart pounded. Through the window, she caught a glimpse, just a flash of movement. The suspect, pacing near the hostage, gun twitching in his hands. It reminded her too much of the market standoff, but this time, something felt different. Ross's voice cut through the comms. "If he raises that gun again, we take the shot." Emily hesitated. "Sir, give me 30 seconds. He frowned. "Carter, please." "Just 30. Ross sighed. "You've got 30. Make it count." Emily crouched beside the patrol car, switched on her mic, and spoke gently. "Mark, my name's Officer Carter. I know you're scared. I need you to listen to me. You don't have to do this." Silence. Then, through the static, "You don't know me." "No," she said softly, "but I know what fear sounds like. I've heard it in myself before. And I know you don't want to hurt anyone. You just want it to stop, right?" For a moment, nothing. Then click. The sound of a gun being set down. "She's not leaving," Mark said shakily. "If I go to prison, she'll leave me for good." Emily swallowed. "That's not true. She wants you alive, Mark. We all do. You can end this right now, and we'll make sure you get help." A minute passed like an eternity. Then, through the dusty glass, she saw the woman inching toward the door. Emily motioned for officers to hold fire. The door creaked open, and the hostage stumbled out, sobbing. "Hostage safe," someone shouted. Emily's relief was short-lived. Mark suddenly stepped into view again, rifle still in his hand, tears streaming down his face. "Don't move," someone yelled. He aimed the weapon not at the officers, but at himself. Emily reacted instantly. She moved out from cover, raising her voice. "Mark, look at me. Put it down. Stay back." He screamed. "You're not alone." She shouted, stepping closer. "You're not a monster. You just need help. Don't throw away your chance." Her voice cracked, not from fear, but emotion. For a heartbeat, Mark looked straight at her. His trembling hand loosened. The rifle clattered to the ground. Officers rushed in, tackling him safely. The area exploded into shouts of relief and applause. But Emily stood frozen, breathing hard, her adrenaline spiking. Reese ran over, gripping her shoulder. "You did it again," he said. "You just saved 2 lives." She let out a shaky breath, half smiling. "Maybe 3, she murmured. Back at the station, Ross called her into his office. "You disobeyed direct order," he began. She tensed. "Sir," he held up a hand. "But you also prevented a suicide and resolved a violent standoff without firing a single shot. I can't ignore that." He leaned back, a faint smile breaking through. "You've got guts, Carter. Controlled guts." Emily laughed softly. "I'll take that as a compliment." "You should," Ross said. "But remember, your instincts are good. Just make sure they don't get you killed." That night, Emily sat in her car outside the station, exhaustion washing over her. She watched the streetlights flicker across her windshield and thought about everything that had happened, the shots, the fear, the relief. It struck her how thin the line was between chaos and calm, between taking a life and saving one. Her phone buzzed. A message from Blake. "Heard about the standoff. You keep this up, they'll name a wing after you." Emily smiled faintly, piping back, "Just doing my job." Reese later joined her in the parking lot, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You know," he said, handing her one, "Ross was right. You've got a weird kind of courage. You think before you act. That's rare." She sipped her coffee, eyes distant. "Sometimes thinking too much is dangerous too." He chuckled. "Maybe, but if I ever get in trouble, I want you on my side." The city lights glowed around them, sirens humming faintly in the distance. Emily looked up at the stars, barely visible above the skyscrapers. For the first time since joining the force, she felt a deep sense of peace, not because of what she'd done, but because of what she'd learned. Heroism wasn't in the headlines or medals. It was in the quiet moments, when you talked someone down, when you stood between fear and safety, when you stayed calm, even as the world around you crumbled. As the night deepened, Reese glanced at her and said, "You know, Carter, they're calling you the focus cop on the news now." She laughed quietly. "Could be worse nicknames." He grinned. "Yeah, but it fits. When everyone else panics, you focus." Emily looked out at the city, her reflection faint in the window. "That's what my dad taught me," she said softly. "And I won't ever forget it." Somewhere in the distance, a call crackled over the radio. Another crime. Another crisis waiting. Reese started the car, and Emily buckled her vest again. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded. "Always." And as the sirens flared to life, painting the night red and blue, Emily Carter's calm eyes reflected the light, steady, unshaken, and unafraid. Because when others lost control, she focused. And when she focused, she saved lives. Years had passed since Emily Carter first walked through the doors of the Monroe Police Academy. The girl who had once been mocked, doubted, and underestimated had become a seasoned officer, respected, feared by criminals, and admired by colleagues. She had faced countless standoffs, negotiations, and life-or-death situations, and yet she never lost the calm precision that had defined her from day one. Now, she returned to the academy, not as a recruit, but as an instructor. The familiar red brick buildings and drill grounds stirred memories, the early mornings, the endless drills, the laughter, and the ridicule. She remembered the sneers, the jokes at her expense, and the doubt in Blake's eyes when she first outshot the entire squad. But more than that, she remembered the determination that had carried her through every challenge. The academy had changed too. New cadets filled the halls, full of energy, ambition, and nervous excitement. Emily observed them from the top of the training field, hands resting on her belt, eyes sharp. Today, she would teach them what she had learned the hard way. That skill alone wasn't enough. It was focus, discipline, and integrity that turned talent into true capability. Sergeant Miller, now a retired advisor, but still a mentor in spirit, greeted her in the courtyard. "Carter," he said, eyes twinkling, "you look ready." "I hope so, sir," she replied. "I want to make sure these cadets don't make the same mistakes I did." He chuckled. "You'll do more than that. You'll show them what it means to be a leader, and maybe remind a few who think they know it all that the quiet ones shouldn't be underestimated." Emily nodded, thinking back to that first day, how Blake had mocked her, how she had stood silently and then outshot everyone. That lesson had followed her into every operation, every crisis, every decision she'd made. Now she would pass it on. The cadets assembled, standing at attention. Emily's voice cut through the morning air, calm but commanding. "Welcome to your precision and tactical training session. Today, you'll learn that success isn't just about speed or power. It's about focus, discipline, and the choices you make when pressure closes in." Whispers ran through the group, some excited, others skeptical. But Emily ignored it. Her eyes scanned the faces, noting the nervous cadets, the cocky ones, and the quiet observers. She remembered herself in all of them. The drills began. Cadets moved through obstacle courses, fired at stationary and moving targets, and practiced teamwork exercises. Emily observed closely, correcting stances, giving tips on breathing, stance, and trigger control. But more importantly, she taught them about patience, observation, and mental resilience. Cadet Thompson, she called, pointing to a young man who had been rushing his shots. Step back. Breathing, alignment, focus. You want to hit the target? You don't rush. You aim. Every bullet matters. Thompson swallowed nervously, adjusting his stance. He fired again. The shot hit dead center. Emily nodded approvingly. See? Focus beats speed every time. Later, she took a group through a simulation. It was designed to replicate a hostage situation, a challenge she had faced many times in the field. Cadets had to enter a building, identify threats, and secure hostages without causing harm. Emily watched from the observation deck, heart in her throat. The simulation escalated quickly. Panicked shouting, simulated gunfire. One cadet froze, overwhelmed by the chaos. Emily's voice cut through the headset. Control your breathing. Remember your training. Focus on the situation, not the noise. The cadet regained composure, moving carefully to neutralize a threat. Emily's heart swelled. This was why she had returned, to prevent fear from paralyzing potential heroes, to guide them so they could save lives instead of making mistakes out of panic. After the drill, the cadets gathered around her, exhausted but exhilarated. Instructor Carter, one of them said, "That was intense. I didn't think I could stay calm under pressure." Emily smiled softly. It's not about staying calm magically. It's about training your mind to act when everyone else panics, to think when everyone else freezes, and to remember that every decision has consequences. Focus will carry you farther than talent alone ever will. As the day ended, Emily walked through the quiet halls of the academy, touching the lockers, recalling memories of laughter and ridicule. She passed by a locker that looked exactly like hers had years ago. A cadet was fiddling nervously with a target report. Emily stopped. "Don't worry about what others think," she said gently. "Your skill isn't defined by anyone else. You define it by your focus and your choices." The cadet looked up, eyes wide, and nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you." Emily continued down the hall, her mind drifting back to Blake, now a respected officer in his own right. She had faced competition, skepticism, and doubt, yet none of it had stopped her. Every challenge, every crisis, every threat had forged her into the officer she had become. And now, passing those lessons to the next generation was her new mission. The sun dipped low over the training grounds, casting long shadows. Emily stood on the field, looking out at the cadets practicing. She remembered herself as the girl mocked for being underestimated, the one who had outshot the entire squad in seconds. But that was only the beginning. The academy had given her tools, but the field had given her courage, resolve, and perspective. Now, she would make sure the cadets understood that lesson. That skill alone meant nothing without the focus to use it wisely, the courage to face fear, and the heart to protect others. As the final rays of sunlight faded, Sergeant Miller approached. "You've done well, Emily. You're passing on more than skills. You're passing on a legacy." Emily nodded, her gaze firm. "That's the only way it matters, sir. If I can make sure even one cadet is ready when it counts, then everything I went through was worth it." Miller smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I think your father would be proud." She touched the medal she still carried in her pocket, the one from him. "I hope so," she whispered. That evening, Emily looked out over the training grounds one last time, listening to the cadets' laughter and shouts. She felt a deep sense of completion, yet a quiet anticipation for what lay ahead. Life would always challenge her, demand focus, and test courage. But she had learned, through every trial, every mockery, every standoff, that she was ready. And as she walked away, the academy behind her, Emily Carter knew that the girl who had been underestimated long ago had not only proven herself, she had become the standard others would now aspire to. The story had come full circle. From mockery to mastery, from doubt to leadership, from rookie to mentor, Emily had transformed herself and would continue shaping the lives of those who followed. Because when others doubted, she focused. And when she focused, she inspired. The end.